сюда.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to see everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. My name is Olga Atamanova. It's been 10 years of the war, and today is day 635 of the full-scale invasion of a homeland by Russian aggressors. And today we have invited you to talk about the veterans. So within this conversation, we are going to present a survey called The Portrait of a Veteran, held by the Ukrainian Veterans Fund of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs. It's the 4th online survey that was held. So today we will be talking not only about the results, but also about the dynamics that experts are observing. So let me introduce our speakers today. Joining us in this studio are Ruslana Velychko-Trifonyuk, First Deputy Executive Director of the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs. Also joining us is Yuliya Kirillova, veteran, head of the Department of Educational and Analytical Work of the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation. Also joining us is Nadiya Adamenko, Deputy Head for the Department of Digital Transformation and Digitalization of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, and Oleksiy Tarabukin, Communications Advisor to the Minister for Veterans Affairs. So, Ms. Ruslana, let's start with you. Let's talk about this 4th survey, how important is it, and how impressed have you been with its dynamics? First of all, I would like to explain why we hold this survey, why we make these measurements every 6 months. So first of all, we measure the attitude of the society to the veterans, and then we survey the veterans themselves to identify what are their real problems. And this difference in the surveys about the way the society sees the veterans and how does it correspond or does not correspond with the real problems of the veterans is something that tells us about stigmatization, because if the society thinks that the main problem of the veterans is to be or is a psycho-emotional instability or problems with physical health or problems with the spaces arranged for the people with disabilities, the veterans themselves see their problems in a little bit different ways. So now if we talk about, say, this percentage, those figures, if the society says that the veterans have psycho-emotional problems and the society sees it as problem, in this way the veterans are going to have problems with employment. If the society has an opinion that veterans are emotionally unstable, however, the veterans themselves see it in a different way. So this is exactly why we make these measurements, why we hold these surveys on a permanent or regular basis, to understand how the society treats veterans, how the society sees veterans, and to identify the problems on veterans' side, to understand when this stigmatization emerges. We can say that it's already there and we have to start working with this problem already. And it's very good, for example, that the society sees, as per results of our survey, that the veterans, the lesser percentage of veterans will have problems with alcohol or with drugs or problems in the family. And in this way, the society says that they don't feel any threat from the veterans, which is already good. But we have to pay attention to these psycho-emotional problems, and we have to work with them, and we have to explain it to the society that the veterans are not just one single type. It's a non-homogeneous mass. It's a section of the society, that they are different and their problems are of individual nature. And now I would like to give the floor to our Yuliya, so she tells more about what the veterans themselves tell us. Yuliya, so let's proceed to the results of this survey. What do veterans say? Let's probably start with the methodology of the survey, and then we'll proceed to the results. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. So today we would like to present the results of our online survey. In September this year, Rate and Social Group was held in a nationwide survey of the society about their attitude to veterans, their needs, probably problems. And we also made an anonymous online survey. We did this thing multiple times, and those surveys proved to be an efficient tool that reflects the key problems and sentiments among this target audience. And I would like to say that this survey is not quite representative, but it reflects the social demand of this target audience. It covered 2,157 respondents, the veterans, both male and female. So 86.6% were male and 13.2% were women. By age, among the veterans surveyed by us, the prevailing age category are young people. So we can say there are people of an age who will require employment after they retire from military service to create very intense potential in recovery of our country. So as to the participation in battle operations, the majority was taking part in battle operations. 40% of them were taking part in battle operations after the 24th of February 2022, and 27% are the veterans of ATO who rejoined armed forces after the 24th of February, and 22% are those who are currently veterans retired from military service. As to the status of the respondents, 73.8% are the participants of battle operations, 17% are people with disabilities, and by the status we see that 9.2% are IDPs and 2.4% have a status of a family member of a perished hero, perished warrior. So in this survey we've decided to ask to compare whether the government fulfills its obligations before the veterans, and we were asking the veterans whether the government fulfills their obligations in their opinion. And as we see, 44.6% say that the government more likely to fulfill their obligations. In February year 2023, we were holding the same type of survey, and we see that the majority of the veterans, they say that the government is likely to fulfill their obligations. However, if we check out the answer does not fulfill at all, we see that this indicator grew almost twice. In February it was around 8%, and now it's 21.4%. Also, we were asking our veterans whether the society respects the veterans in opinion on the veterans themselves, and we see these answers: 38.8% likely to respect, and 34.3% said that the society is likely to disrespect the veterans. And we compared with the results of the survey as of February, and we see that the figure of the first answer, in February the veterans were thinking that the society does respect veterans, and in October this indicator fell to 4.5%, and respectively when we were asking whether the society does not respect veterans at all, in February the response was at the level of 4%, and in October this indicator grew to 9.8% of the veterans. So if we ask the veterans to evaluate the degree of probability of different risks in them, very likely the veterans said that they may have problems with physical health, 55.2%. 53.8% say that they may have problems related to psycho-emotional instability, and 53.2% say that they may have problems with absence of adapted workplace and inclusive space for the people with disabilities. And less probable, the veterans see the problems with crime, suicide, 21.1%, and 16.6% see the problems in irrelevant experience as an employee. When we were asking about the level of satisfaction of their needs for the time being, we see quite interesting indicators. When we were asking about psychological support, the level of provision, there was a scale from 0 to 5 points, and the availability of psychological support was evaluated at 4.8 points. Meanwhile, 35.5% think that psychological support is not provided at all. The same story is with the legal support. Only 3.5% give 5 points to this type of support, and evaluated as absolutely non-existent is almost 35%. As to the advisory support, about 15% evaluate this category as fully provided with this support, and about 50% say that they are almost not provided with this type of support. As to the medical support. As we've seen from our previous questions about probable risks, everybody evaluated it as probable risk, problems with physical health, and we see that physical rehabilitation or prosthetics is evaluated by our veterans as quite low. 15% evaluated as good, I mean the medical support, and respectively we see about 11 to 12% about physical rehabilitation and prosthetics. Talking about retraining and educational needs, the same indicators are here in place as we were talking earlier. For the time being, veterans are young people who will probably require retraining after they retire or support with employment. And those educational opportunities are evaluated at quite low level, 0 and 1.36 and 36 and 5, 24 and 1%, quite low indicators. The veterans evaluate the preferential billing for public transport. The veterans evaluate this service as good. As to the support of development of their business, us as Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, we provide grant support to our veterans so they could develop their businesses, and for us it's always important to ask this question. We pay attention to this question in every our survey. So the veterans evaluate as satisfactory. 9% of the veterans evaluated as satisfactory. And the majority so far has not obtained those guarantees they're entitled to, so we have a lot to work on here. And talking about the material support and employment, those are the questions that in every hour survey is the most widespread type of, most demanded type of support by the veterans. So the veterans don't really evaluate it as quite good, and we understand those areas where we have to continue working and creating some changes. And talking about the support that the veterans need right now, almost 41% say that they need material support. And more than 18% say that they need medical support. So this medical support may be tracked among those risks that the veterans see as probable after the liberation, after they retire. So they think that the medical services should be improved. Also, we see the demand for psychological support. So this indicator is quite stable. During all of our surveys, it's 17.4%, and respectively the indicator of legal support 10%. So, do the veterans plan to get back to their jobs after demobilization? Here we track quite interesting figures. If we compare it with the previous surveys, more than half of the veterans say that they either don't plan to come back or it's difficult to answer. And in reality, the reasons may be quite different for them not to come back to their previous jobs. When we were making a more profound analysis, the veterans themselves were saying that their interests and needs are changing and they would like to develop in other areas or to establish their own businesses. Some of the servicemen say that during their service they were fired from their jobs. And when we ask whether the society is aware about the problems of the veterans, what do the veterans themselves think? So the opinions split here. 43.4% think that the society is mostly informed and aware about the problems of the veterans. Meanwhile, 35% say that the society is not aware at all. So we can track some differences here. And talking about the nationwide survey, I would like to say, in the opinion of the society itself, when we were making a comparative analysis, in the opinion of the society, they think that the society is now better aware of the problems of the veterans in civil life. And when we were making a demographic analysis, the phenomena that we've identified, that in the families of those surveyed, those indicators have grown, which means that the presence of the veterans in these families, or presence of the veterans among the friends of those families, is a results in such awareness. It's not because, which says that it's not because the people are looking for this information, but because they have veterans in their close circles, close crowds, among their friends, among their families, and this is why they become aware of these problems. Thank you very much for your attention. You may find more information in our social pages on our official website. You can get familiarized with the previous surveys as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Miss Nadiya. Let's talk about the results. Probably it's important that you've heard something for yourself, and today we may start talking about what the state can do to help the veterans, both male and female. Good afternoon. I think that today's presentation, this survey, is an illustrative example of synergy of Ukrainian Veteran Foundation efforts and the Ministry for Veterans Affairs. You know, we see it on a daily basis. The information about the veterans of the war, the members of the families, the members of the families of the perished warriors, or people with the special merits, the participants of the Revolution of Dignity. Those people are all on the joint register of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, and we sometimes evaluate that information as just statistics on the register. And really, maybe only within the last couple of days, including the weekends, we were discussing it with my colleagues, the needs. So what was the statistics that we were taking from the register? So if we talk about the breakdown by regions, the number of veterans of war, what is the gender breakdown? What fraction of the veterans are female? So we were analyzing the data by categories, by regions and communities. When we were talking about this project that we actively develop, the veterans aids, to understand the needs of the veterans, we have to understand the number of the veterans in those territorial communities. But thankfully, our register is not only about the quantity data, but it contains a lot of other information, and in compliance with the legislation, we have to accumulate the data about the extension of material help, material aid, and also about the employment, about the provision of psychological support, the provision of compensation for destroyed property. So all those details are actually important, and we have to integrate our databases with other registers, so there is exchange of data, and we operate some general data here, and the general picture that may exist is the full statistics of the register. And as I see on a daily basis, as this register is being, as the data is being added to this register, it's the fundamental thing for everybody to get an understanding of the huge amount of work that we had since year 2014 to 22, that there was a growth of data in the register. And I would like to remind that starting from the year 2014, the first register was the register of participants of anti-terroristic operation, but we've built it in such a way that in the year 2018 the register of veterans of war was started in its development, and now we have data even about the participants of the World War II, and on a monthly basis we get more details about new participants of warfare, and the last figure was 20,000 for one commission only, and there are more than 30 such commissions. So we understand how much work we have to develop the new veterans policy for those who are covered by this survey. You see, is the working age of 40-45 years, the majority of the respondents, and this general outlook is necessary to actualize the specific areas that allow us to prioritize the work in this or those programs. However, I was touched by the words of Ruslana. She says that figures are figures, but it's an individual thing. It depends. You know, the registers, the data of such sociological survey is not about the figures, it's about the people. And regardless of the fact that there are more than 1 million of people on this register now, it's all about individual stories. Where are those people? Unfortunately, some fraction of them are in the battle area of battle operations, and someone keeps working for the sake of the defense of the state. But the point is that many of them come back to their communities on a daily basis. And this is where we come to this issue of data personalization as people come back to the civil life. So we can say 2%, 10%, 50%, but it's one individual who was injured, they got an experience of rehabilitation, and they come back to their communities. So what we do in the Ministry of Veterans is an electronic service, the application for individual path of transition to civil life. And first stage is a personalized survey, is the identification of a person through electronic digital signature. It's the filling of questionnaire that was developed by the experts of the Ukrainian Veterans Fund, all the security and defense forces, scientists, Civil Expert Council of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, and as a result we're having this questionnaire containing almost 100 questions. The people may fill it, not like everybody, but those people should be verified through joint state register of the veterans, so we can make sure that they are from our register, or we should apply to other register of security and defense forces to understand whether they really belong to our categories. So what we get as a result, we get a person with the first and last name and patronymic who belong to the category that was taking part in the defense of our country, and they confirm their community, the territorial community they would like to come back to after demobilization or due to other reasons, and in that community they may have specific interests. And what's next for us? So as we study the issue of transition back to civil life, so there are classic approaches, there is global practice, and we see that such transitions are happening in the communities, and questioning or surveying the veterans is one thing, but social and economic capabilities of the community is a whole different story. So what we do is building of a regional policy to reach out to every community so we can understand that these are the problems that we have and how we as a state and a community can ensure the development of those problems, so it's not left as a need itself, but that need is covered. And interesting things are happening here, because not all of the communities are economically capable. Some of them were preferential and subsidized even before the full-scale invasion, and after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, situation got even more complicated, and we should find the way to build this bridge. So we started our pilot project in Vinnytsia, where we gather these capabilities of the communities, and we're surprised to see that from one community only we've got more than 1,300 different types of services. For example, there is a problem of teeth prosthetics, which is covered by the law. So let's not forget about the members of the veterans' families. There is a lot of services for the members of the families, like dancing groups, which are free for the family members of the veterans, and we should be aware of those capabilities of the communities, and only under the conditions of decentralization and synchronous work we may realize the coverage of all those needs. And we have to understand that every path is individual. Some may insist that they need material aid, period. Yeah, we see that almost 50% say so, yes, but what we also see is that our demands are classical: material aid, psychological support, physical rehabilitation. But for example, if we add opportunities here, for example, opportunity to be an active participant of political activities of a community, maybe some of the veterans don't want to have 1,000 hryvnias per year of material aid, but otherwise they want to be trained in how to be politically active, how to be a leader of changes in their community. And that's a whole different type of demand. And as we talk to the veterans or the military who are not yet retired, we understand that sooner or later they will become the participants of battle operations. There is a lot of communication with the military who are only in the middle of obtaining their documentary status, and we see that there are very innovative demands and needs to exercise this type of activity, to create their own businesses, and Ukrainian Veterans Foundation is a leader in these grant programs to cover those needs, also in understanding of the fact that You know, when there is a stress, you can go to a therapist tete-a-tete, but the veterans frequently say that for them it's better to cope with those challenges in teams, and they would like to have a support group organized together with the families. It would be a place of rest and a therapy to support each other. I'm sorry, I don't want to take a lot of time, but during this experimental project Veterans Aid, you see, in Vinnytsia region we have 12 employed Veterans Aid based on the principle equal to equal, and I had a Zoom tea party with them. We were talking for 2 hours in the evening, and they were telling us about the way they work, what were their needs, and they said one interesting thing. They said, you know, the transition from military to civil life is a complex issue. We have to think about it, but we work mostly on 2 demands. First, we support those who are currently in the hospitals, because it's the most complicated thing. We are proactive, we go to the hospitals, and we provide some complex advice, consultations to help to the best of our capabilities. And then in the public spaces we meet to support each other and to communicate each other about the different demands and needs. This is why this survey tells us a lot of things about where we should move to, where we should get prepared, and how to develop this individual policy of coverage of veterans' need and the capabilities of specific communities. Thank you very much, Mr. Oleksiy. Really, the survey is quite important, and unfortunately we see it looks so that the main indicators, the most important indicators, are falling. We see that after half of a year, it was not a lot of time, but the fall is almost twice, which is significant result. So why cannot we catch up? Do we have a lot more veterans coming and we cannot launch all of the processes at the same time? So what is the problem and what should we do about it? Thank you very much. I was confident that this issue or this question will be asked, because as such surveys are issued, the biggest focus is on the respect in the society and obligations of the state to cover the veterans' need. But I would like to ask you to focus on analysis of the figures that I've discovered for myself just a couple of days ago as I was reading through this. So talking about the obligations of the state before the veterans. Last time, half a year ago, this survey demonstrated that 8.5% were completely dissatisfied. But the percentage of respondents who said that they had no status that would ensure certain opportunities for them, you see, it was 30%, now it's 21%, but the percentage of, so which means that, well, now this percentage is 15, so it's twice less the people without status. So the more people ask for services, more people evaluate it from the point of view of their relevance, of their availability, of the degree to which those services cover their needs. So in my opinion, it's not about the deterioration of services, but it's about the fact that the veterans evaluate the quality of services more thoroughly and they articulate it better. We see that now in the information space there's a lot of statements about the opportunities for the veterans, what the state can do for the veterans. It's one of the pressing topics, and the quality services should not be a merit of the state. It should be a norm which is not articulated, not something that you can get tapped on your shoulder for, because it just should be so. But if a service is provided in a non-quality way, it should be emphasized, because this is when we see where we should continue working, which way we should be moving. So I see no Indicators of deterioration of services. Yes, now our system is facing a huge workload. When the services were not adapted for such a number of recipients. But again, if we check out those figures, we see that the basic needs that the veterans express now and in future, it's medical support, rehabilitation, prosthetics, psychological support, everything that we already know. There's nothing new that we discover for us. We understand that there are problems that are being worked on. Talking about material aid, on this graph, it correlates with the development of the veterans' businesses and entrepreneurship. It's not about the veterans requiring certain amount of money. It's about their need for opportunities so they could cover the needs of their families. Again, we make a profound analysis of this survey, and only then we will draw some conclusions. So talking about the indicator of respect by the society, I can assume that first of all, the question is formulated in a way to make the veterans oppose the society, and probably the veterans perceive the state and government institutions and provision of services as expression of respect towards them. And I think that it could influence the fact that this indicator of respect has fallen. And another analytical conclusion during the previous survey that was held from 5th to 7th September, there were two indicators: to what degree you as a citizen respect the veterans, and there was like likely to respect, it was 94%, and to what extent the society trusts or respects the veterans. So you see, and the indicator was way lower, but when people on individual basis, when they are being asked personally, they say that they respect the veterans, but when they see the section of the society, they don't see some huge respect. So this is something that we have to analyze again. We clearly understand that there are problems. Everything I'm saying now is not to say that everything is fine, but it's about the fact that we're not degrading. It doesn't necessarily mean we should not react. We understand it's a red light. We should orient it, that it should become a benchmark for us. It's another survey that confirms that we have to make a complex reform of legislation in the sphere of veterans support. We have to implement strategic projects like veterans aid, and both local projects like compensation for acquisition of housing. We understand it, and please don't focus a lot of attention on these figures, of the respect indicators of trust and respect of the veterans as a critical indicator. Thank you. So, Ms. Ruslana, I wanted to also add and draw your attention to the fact that veterans policy is being implemented with 22 agencies of local governments. So the Ministry for Veterans Affairs coordinates it all, and other state enterprises and agencies who have this relevant status, they implement it all. So if we check out these indicators, we have to have other ministries focus on that. For example, medical support, psychological support, where and how they can improve it all, and probably review the processes, how it all happens and how all those things are implemented. Probably it's necessary to have, for example, basic medical aid provided not by social workers, but rather certified psychologists. the professionals, well, we understand what we expect from the regions. It was articulated during our conversation, but what should the central government do? Well, wait, central government is still responsible for everything, because what we're saying, it's a regional policy and the regions are supposed to be interested in this. So the head of a municipal council shouldn't say it's the central government's problem, we're the local government, it's not a problem because the veterans come to them. And the way it was happening before, when we were saying we would start doing things after the victory, so now when the veterans start coming back, they realize that it's a national-wide problem of the society, of the local governments, of civil organizations, and central government as well. And the problem is that those social workers, they don't only work somewhere in the ministries in Kiev, they are in every region, just like administrative support centers. It's all connected, just like we were mentioning stigmatization, that there is a huge gap between what the society thinks about the problems of the veterans and what are the real problems of the veterans in veterans' opinion. So a huge role here is played by the civil organizations and civil society, just like the journalists, because the problem of stigmatization is something that they can very well work with. So solving this problem that we already have and that is still ahead for us and that may even deteriorate if we stay not united, if we don't fix this problem altogether. So let's try to specify what we expect from the civil unions in the regions, civil organizations. How can the civil society help to support our veterans? Well, I can give you an example of the United States of America. It's not like everywhere legal advice is provided by the government institutions and government agencies. A lot of legal clinics are established, legal advisory boards are established there at private companies, at university campuses, at the expense of government funds. They provide those services. Now there is a contest of civil organizations going on, and we were announcing during this contest that there is also the contest of civil organizations for the support of the veterans. They can also work in this area too. They can work on psychological rehabilitation through sports, for example. So organizing certain infrastructure in the existing gymnasium so that the veterans could practice some sport activities there, well, it would be fine, and the state is interested in that. We keep walking around and we shout it out loud. People, come on, let's work together. It's difficult, yes, it's difficult, but let's work together, because waiting for someone, some ministry or 2 or 3 ministries to go to deal with this problem, well, it's a little bit naive. I apologize. Thank you very much. I would like to invite our guests and colleagues to ask their questions. Yana Lomoshenko, Ukrinform. I'm having a question about the employment of the veterans. And how can the government encourage the employers to employ the veterans? And another question in the same of the same type. Talking about the veterans who want to start their own business, we were talking about the grants here, but maybe there are some trainings that you plan to organize for this matter. Well, talking about the employment, we are in a stalemate here because the job market, as we can see, started transforming. It started transforming since summer, and for the time being the question is mostly about the fact that many businesses ask us to develop the program for adaptation of the veterans in their companies. At the same time, we have programs which describe who works how with the veterans in their businesses, the best practices basically. So there is also another problem about the agrarians and other type of companies from different sectors who say we want veterans employed with us, and we ask the veterans and they say well, you know, we don't know, we're gonna think about it. And there is a huge problem. There is a demand from the business and there is a demand from the veterans, and those demands, they do not correlate. So we've started in-depth interviews with the veterans to understand what is their demand, what do they expect to make at that job, what is their education level, what are their skills, what are their talents, how do they see themselves, where do they want to go. And if we overlay one matrix over another, this is when we understand where we can move. And talking about the employment of the veterans, we were talking already and we will reiterate it. We were submitting the request to the job center, and within a year of the full-scale invasion they responded that the more than 6,000 veterans were registered and 2,000 of them were employed. Meanwhile, 118 were forwarded for retraining. So again, it's for your understanding of the degree to which the veterans want to use those services. Maybe we should transform our approach here. We should probably consider some short-term retraining courses like MBAs or some other courses, or even private business schools and stuff like that. Well, you can find this information on the website of Ukrainian Veterans Fund too, because we've started doing it already. We've started working in this area, we've identified this problem, and we've started working on it. Talking about veterans businesses, Ukrainian Veterans Fund last year established an online course in cooperation with Ukrainian Catholic University, and everyone can sign up and be trained in this course, during which they can be told about what is the individual entrepreneur, what is legal entity, what is better to register, what is taxed in this way, how do you work with the accounting, and the stuff like that. Also described there is how exactly you can apply for our bids, for our contests, and when we announce those contests, we every Thursday, usually every Thursday, we have advisory sessions during which we explain how to fill the application, what the expense articles are prohibited, which ones are allowed. Our last advisory session lasted more than 3 hours. Thank you. We have more questions in the studio. Yeah, may add a couple of words to the in response to the previous question. When we talk about employment and training or retraining, it's a complex. Ruslana said it right, that in fact all of the central government ministries, agencies work with the veterans policy, and when we talk about employment, we talk about the state job center. And just yesterday I've seen there is an option to sign up for professional technical education course, and I think about there are 1,500 of such offers of such courses or training programs. But training or retraining cannot be a goal itself. It should be oriented for employment, because the result of transition from military life to civil life is a successful employment or private entrepreneurship. Why I've taken the floor from Ruslana today at 8 o'clock. I had a Zoom meeting and we start to create the electronic register of educational programs for the veterans, and there was a number of general criteria. In fact, in our program of professional adaptation we have our budget for training, but it's important how to get it connected with the training. So developing these criteria, we were paying a lot of attention to the practice. So it's not only theory, but it's mostly practice, and it's important to have this criteria in the veterans program. And there should be grants for potential employers, so you could enter eveteran.gov.ua, pick your application for a training course or refresher training, and you can choose whether you want to improve your soft skills is one program, or I want to get employed, that's another program. I need more fundamental program, and this fundamental program, it's a mandatory criteria for us to try ourselves as in business or in a government institution. And this is what Ruslana says. It's important to have the demand of the employer and the veteran to match, and we should implement a number of practical steps here. It's very complicated. We're now re-engineering all of our services, because one thing is writing concept and to say like something doesn't exist and we need it, but another thing is to have an existing service re-engineered. I'm talking in IT language, so we break down those services and we try to build it in a different way. So education and employment is the most difficult service that we are re-engineering now, and the civil society that you are asking about, a colossal role can be played by it, because popularization of the professions, of the demanded professions demanded in different regions, in different communities, and creation it, like in the United States, we were meeting civil organizations which are in fact HR agencies for the veterans. The veterans themselves, they make those civil organizations, they find those contacts from the employers, or it's cool to have a civil organization which works in IT or veterans organization, which can develop a portal connected to Raota.ua, work.ua, and to put a tick veteran friendly there, so it can be added to some application to demonstrate that these or those employers want to see veterans employed with them. Yeah, we had another question in the studio.
My name is Demjan. I'm with Australian Media as a freelancer, but I'm also a medic, an instructor, and a veteran of this war for 9 years. Over that period of time, I've tried to contact the government in terms of the concerns of veterans, because I have a background in criminology, criminal justice, and forensic science. In 2016, I conducted an 80-question survey of veterans, and I presented these findings to the European Court of Human Rights because they were very concerned about how they were being treated in Ukraine. This year I've done the same thing, and 2016 I had 15,000 responses. This year I have over 5,000 responses, and I intend to get to 15,000 responses again because the European Court of Human Rights wants to know the changes since 2016. I've written on behalf of myself and other veterans to all three of you in the last few months, 3 times, and got no response. So the veterans that I've talked to, that I've written on their behalf to each of your organisations, have asked me what's the point of veteran organisations if they're not even going to respond to your emails. And I said to them, I will try today, talking to you, to ask this question: why is there little response to the veterans out there, not just myself, but many others on the front lines? Why there is either very slow response or no response at all?
Хто візьме на себе відповідь?
Well, who is going to answer? I didn't hear, well, yeah, there was interpretation in the terminal. Well, if I understood you correctly, yes, yes, this gentleman was submitting the request, the applications to you. So why do those organizations, why do your agencies even exist if you don't respond to the veterans or to the organizations who work with the veterans? Well, let's talk after this meeting, because if we talk about the system of the central government, we have a very strict system for the responses to information. We don't have any right to violate the law and not to respond. There was a response for sure. If there was no response, it's virtually impossible. But a whole different thing is that probably the nature of the response does not correspond with the expectations, with what their veterans request. Me, for example, as a representative of a digital department of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, we're getting a lot of individual requests from the veterans on a daily basis, for example, about the excerpts from the Joint State Register, and we are obliged to respond within 30 days, but the excerpt from the register is a simple thing. It takes us 5 days to respond. Well, then I suggest you to talk after this briefing, because we would like to give the opportunity to all of the participants of our press conference. I apologize, Andriy Kucher, the Union of the Injured Warriors, 300 strong ones. Well, the fraction of the society has grown, which is seen as those who disrespect the veterans, you know, on the background of corruption scandals. It doesn't provide additional support to the guys in the trenches. So I appreciate your input with regard to these surveys, and I would like those surveys to be more regular, more frequent, you know, maybe once in 2 months, once in 3 months, because the same questions regarding the medical commissions is something that will provide the clear response for the government about what way they should move. And another remark regarding the society, when we ask whether the society is ready to accept the veterans, this is the question to segregate the veterans and the society, and we would like to support these rhetorics together. I mean, the government, the veterans organizations, and other parts of civil sector, because we are parts of the society, and this is what we fight for. We fight for this society, we die for this society in this trenches. So please don't segregate, please support the opinion that we are one, and we should develop the common tactics, how we cooperate in future. We are the veterans in the society. I think that this rhetoric should be implemented on the state level. And another remark, that it's desirable to have the sociological survey be one step ahead of the government, because when we talk about the law number 1411, it would be probably right to first talk about the veterans there. When we talk about the veterans' aids, probably we should first talk to the veterans. And I'm having a question to you, Ms. Nadiya. Did you have such a sociological survey before implementation of this institute of the veterans' aids? Thank you for this question. Well, look, the idea of veterans' aids, it emerged in the middle of the year 23, so somewhere in June. The budget year is ending before the 18th of December. So the first thing that triggered us, it was that in February 23, the Joint Register of Veterans started working, and the security and defense forces and the social institutions that provide the certificates of the participants of battle operations, they started sending out the letters to add the data to the register, data for the previous years where there was a gap for the years 21, 22, and as of May and June we started getting the actual data, and we've seen this huge growth. You know, it's more difficult situation with the participants of battle operations. There is a number of documents that are not processed yet with the commissions. The things are only start getting arranged now. We understand that what are the regions where that account for the biggest number of the injured warriors, and the service providers themselves, they do not cope with those problems, not because they cannot do this, but because the people who were injured, they find it difficult to visit all those institutions, all those service providers. So there should be a person who can do this as a mediator. And we're not saying that the Veterans Aid is a universal response to this problem. This is why the project says that it's not an implementation of the universal aid, but it's aimed at developing the mechanism and talking about the research. This experiment is a research, is a survey itself. So 9 regions plus the city of Kiev are in permanent work, and I started this work as a business analyst. I have 2-hour Zoom sessions with representatives of every region. I'm curious about how the regional territorial communities are treating this. What is their experience? Should we continue this project? And if we talk about Vinnytsia and Dnipro, we already work with the veterans aids themselves, and in Vinnytsia we've found 500, more than 2,500 applications, and we will ask them to organize their, we still don't know how to call the applicants, those who apply for the veterans aids. It's complicated. The aids, they themselves, they say those are our brothers in arms, in masculine brothers. And what we do during this experiment, we get the recipients of all those services for focus groups and our studies, and we will evaluate it, how it happened within this experimental project until the 31st of January. We have to have this thing finalized. So I invited a consultation. We will present the results in the communities, in the regions. It happens so far during the meetings with the participation of ministers. We meet the ministers, we meet the regional organizations, and we have to invite civil organizations and the veterans themselves who can see those projects and processes from inside. So this Veterans Aid is a study itself so far. And on Friday, those who apply as the Veterans Aid, why they ask me, why do you keep saying that this is an experiment? Are you experimenting on us? But I'm saying I apologize, but it's a normative name of a project. This is how it says in the regulations. So we're talking about this process as the one with the participation of many people. We have the last question here. Good afternoon, Marta Povarenko. I represent an international newsletter which is published in 8 languages, and my question is about the data that were about their demands for medical support, veterans' needs in medical services and psychological support. I've heard this figure 19%, so my question is about the global practice. In global practice, the medical services are not segregated from psychological support, and my question is probably to Yuliya. In your opinion, why in Ukrainian realities medical services and psychological support are segregated, and is it supposed to be so? Really? So let me answer, because now we will be talking about the legislation. On the level of legislation, it's segregated, and that's it. Why did it happen so? I think that it's not us who is supposed to answer this question. We are not entitled to vote for the laws, just like Ukrainian Veterans Fund. It's not a subject of legislative initiative. We cannot propose the draft laws, but why did it happen so is unclear. The primary or basic psychological support is provided by medical service representatives, and some medical services are provided by military hospitals, and there is also a civil component there, the Ministry of Health. Well, that's it. Thank you for your answer, and I would like to thank everybody, all of our participants, all of our panelists, for covering these important issues important for our society. I want to thank all of you. We understand that there is a lot of work ahead, and we hope that such an intense communication between the government and the regions and the civil society is something that will produce certain result. Thank you. We want to thank our security and defense forces. Right now we're working on the schedule for tomorrow, so please follow our announcements. Stay tuned. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.